Welcome back to the Ace for Waves podcast. I'm Annabelle, and you're listening to the Ace for Waves podcast right now. And I'm really excited for this one, guys. We've I'm shying away a little bit from my usual, main content stuff. So we're doing an A plus life advice segment today, and I have something to share with you all. I think it's going to be something that a lot of people might be able to relate to. It's not something that I personally can relate to, but I'm going to try my best to explain myself in the best way possible, just so you guys can kind of feel that connection to me. And this is not about sports, like I said. We're doing an A plus life advice segment, which is a segment on the podcast where I just offer life advice on life situations, just general stuff that people deal with on a daily basis in the world, and kind of offer some of my stance, my support, my advice to help people relate or deal with it. And it's another way for me just to share a tiny bit more of myself rather than talking about all the sports stuff, which don't get me wrong, I love talking about sports and researching and doing like fact checks for all of my sports content. I get such great joy in doing that. But I also want to try to be a little bit more personal, a little bit more relatable, and just offer some viewpoints on the world because we live in a very crazy world. We live in I think I can justify it as a pretty messed up world in certain parts of Earth, but we're not going to talk about all the messed up stuff today. Today's topic is relationships. And I want to put this out as my disclaimer before we begin. I do not have any experience with relationships. So that's why I said that I might not be the best person to be talking about this, but I did do a little bit of research before going into this episode. And relationships are something that most people in the world deal with on a certain level. I'm not going to be the one to judge people's relationships because I don't know you guys. I can't relate to your experiences. I don't have much experience in the dating slash relationship realm myself. So who am I to judge when I've never really been through something like that? But I have seen people's relationships throughout the years as a college student, and I know for some of my other college friends, I think relationship stuff in general is where it kind of starts to really hit hard and a little bit closer to home when you're trying to deal with school and figuring out what your life is going to look like after college or after, that next step up from high school. So, we're going to talk about all of that. And I'm going to do my best to stay as neutral as possible. I understand that I could sound a little bit biased at times, so my apologies for that. But let's dive in. Let's see if I can offer some great life advice today. As al- these are just some of my these are stuff that I think makes relationships work. I'm going to kind of detail and net out what I makes a healthy relationship, what other people say makes a healthy relationship, and we can kind of break down each part of that and then go from there. So one of the things that you not guys need or what anyone needs for a healthy relationship is communication. I talked about communication on my first life advice segment when I was talking about what we fear or what adults fear growing up. And communication was one of them. Communication, I think, is a lot of people's fears. I know it's something that I have a fear of trying to communicate, feelings and emotions to other people who I might not know as well as, family and then close friends. But when you don't have communication between yourself and your significant other or your partner or whoever you associate that person with, it's not going to work. You're going to find yourself getting into more arguments. You're going to find yourselves clashing with one another, and you're not going to find that middle ground between what's right and what's wrong. I know people cannot communicate because they fear that no one's going to listen to them or feel like rejected by going to ask for help or going to say something very basic. I feel for those people, and those feelings are very much valid and should not be pushed to the ground. Sometimes we have trouble being vulnerable and we have trouble trying to express our true selves. Maybe it's because we don't know who ourselves are quite yet. And it could take some time to get there. But I always say that if you don't have communication, then you're you're never going to be on the same page. And you guys do want to be at least have some understanding and some level of mutual respect between one another. So even if communication scares you or you feel like communication isn't necessarily your strong suit, there are ways to work around that. I think just having an open discussion with your partner or your significant other is the first step to trying to get over that communication fear, and just speaking from the heart and being truthful. Lying to yourself and lying to your partner is only going to cause more harm than good. I know we as humans all have feel an instinct and have the urge to lie sometimes, whether that be to protect another person, whether that be to protect ourselves or to avoid, getting into trouble. But being honest with your feelings, being honest with your emotions is a good sign of communication, where you can communicate how you're feeling and making sure that other person, partner, significant other, whatever, is aware of your boundaries and is aware of your feelings and thoughts at that moment. And communication is a two-way street. If someone is communicating to you about how they're feeling, that opens the door again for you to communicate to them back. And then it turns into a good, well needed, or well nurtured discussion. Communication sometimes can lead to arguments, but if you're both being mindful, if you're both being open, and you're both willing to respect the other person's thoughts, opinions, feelings, then it should be replicated back to you. If you don't feel like someone else is giving you the communication or the respect or the wisdom that you feel that you need, then that's another topic and that's another discussion to have, not only with that person, but maybe some other people who are more qualified and have more of a specialty in that area. So that's number one. Communication is a good sign and a good way to develop a healthy relationship. And like I said before, it's a two-way street. If only one person is doing that communication, it's not going to work out. Both parties need to be involved and have a heavy, emphasis on that communication in the relationship. The second thing is honesty. I know I talked about this briefly just a few seconds ago, but when I've mentioned, we have the urge to lie sometimes, to either protect someone else, to protect ourselves. We Every person has lied at some point in their life. It's what makes us human. But if you're lying constantly in the relationship and you're wanting to take it to the next level, Nobody's gonna want to be with a person who is just dishonest right from the get-go. I know that sometimes we lie to minimize or not make a certain situation or a certain feeling more or less emotional or more or less, complicated than what it already is. But being honest means you're willing to be vulnerable. Um, you're willing to accept criticism and own up to either your mistakes or your achievements too. Um, I straight up lying to someone to get out of a sticky situation is 10 out of 10 times not gonna go over well and can also be seen as a red flag. If someone is not being honest completely with you, the best way to go about that is just end the relationship there. I if it if it's been a long-term relationship, but your significant other slash partner is not being honest with you, the earlier you see that, the earlier you can get out and risk the not risk being more hurt and being more of a target for them. And again, it goes the same way. If you're lying to your partner to try to get out of something wrong that you did, they're not gonna like that. And I think deep down, we always feel the sense of guilt and just the deep feelings of regret. And honesty is not meant to be easy. We can kind of think that at times. I think a lot of people mistake honesty as speaking something from your heart, and that can be true. I'm not saying that that's false. It can be true, but being honest is a lot harder than what we think because again, we're opening up ourselves to either mistakes, we're opening up ourselves to admitting failure, times we're opening up ourselves to times that might have not been the best for us, but at least we're putting it out there. And the more you're honest and the more you, again, communicate your feelings with a person, the better that it will make you feel, the better it will make the other person feel. And then it sets up that relationship for a healthy boundary and it makes that relationship between the two people or however many work in a good well-spirited way. Again, I have trouble with honesty sometimes too, and it's something that I'm trying to get better at in life in general. It's not meant to be easy. It is kind of meant to be a little bit hard at times, but you're going to feel so much better if you're just honest from the get-go, if you're honest about how you're feeling, if you're honest about coming clean about a mistake that you have made. The more you get it out there, the more it will be easier to maybe be more honest going forward, not just in a relationship too. Honesty can be it this can be said for the same thing about, friendships. It can be said for the same thing about relationships. It could be said about the same thing in a school environment, a social environment, a work environment. Honesty is key in all of those categories. It just doesn't honestly just doesn't have to be replicated in a relationship. Next thing, respect. I think respect is a two-way street again. If you respect someone, if you respect, your partner, your significant other, whatever, then that respect should be handed back the same way to you. If you don't respect the person, you should not expect that respect back. And what I see most commonly just from, observing out in the real world and through online is that humans have the hardest time respecting other people's viewpoints and people's sexualities. That this is a hard topic to kind of talk about, and without sounding like, a straight up, I don't know how to best describe it, but I'm gonna say this first before I dive into my little spiel here. It is not hard to respect people's sexualities. I'm gonna put that out there right now. It is not that hard to respect people's sexualities. We might not agree with it. It might not be our own personal viewpoint of how we're supposed to perceive people's, gender pronouns and their sexualities, but it's not that hard to respect it. Even if you don't agree with it, we can all still respect it. Now, does it mean that we have to feel, validated and feel like we're agreeing with that person's choice? Not necessarily, but we also don't have to be complete idiots about it either. I was going to say another word, but that's too strong of a word too even for me. But we don't have to make a big deal about it in public if two women are holding hands or if two men are kissing. We don't have to we don't have to exaggerate it and make it such a big deal when it's becoming a bit more of a norm in our society today. Again, it doesn't mean we have to agree with it, but if someone comes out to about their sexuality to you or to a whole group, we can respect that if that person or that group of people means something to us. That's something I feel very strongly about. It's something that I've seen in recent years about more people coming out about their sexualities and their preferred pronouns and whatever. And again, just want to reiterate this. Just be it doesn't mean we have to agree with it, but we don't have to make a big deal out of it. We don't have to be complete idiots and complete, fools about it either. That someone coming out to you means that they trust you enough and that they're feeling vulnerable and willing to give a part of themselves to you. So, in the grand scheme of the world, I don't think respect is a hard thing to give back to them. Another thing I want to mention is the cycle of support networks and what kind of do we value, and respect falls into this category as well. So I just said it's called the cycle of support networks, and how I like to deal with is the first thing, what do you value? What do you value in relationships? For some people, they value honesty. For some people, they value that communication. They might value happiness or friendships first, but it can be replicated in a huge cycle. It doesn't really have to be necessarily this, but the first, I think what most people value in relationships first off is respect. I just need to say respect here. And respect equals trust. If you're willing to respect someone and you get that respect back, that opens up the fence and that opens up the, your hearts to trust somebody. And that trust leads equals honesty. If you trust someone, chances are you're more willing to be more honest and more open, maybe a little bit more vulnerable and, willing to give that part of yourself to someone else. And then that honesty too, when you're honest, leads to communication, like we just talked about before previously. So it's all replicated in one big cycle here that I like to call the cycle of support networks, where you start off with respect, respect equals trust, that trust equals honesty, and that honesty equals communication. And all in all leads to a good and healthy or happy relationship. You can also insert other certain values or other certain keywords that fit best for you, for what you might look for in a relationship into that big cycle. I just gave a specific example of how I kind of view it as, but you can erase words, you can add words to it. It's not perfect and it's not meant to be perfect either. Just like relationships are not meant to be perfect right away. Every relationship has its flaws. Every relationship is going to go through a roller coaster of a ride. It's not going to be just straight up easy. And it's not meant to be easy because you are a team and you're working together. When you're just starting out in a relationship, you're figuring out what you want, you're figuring out what your partner or partners want, and it's gonna be a mess at first. It's gonna take some time. Do not rush a relationship just because you want to be in one right away. That's not how it works. And I'm sure that people who have been in a relationship for many, many years will tell you the same thing. Know what you want first. And if you're not ready to be in a relationship yet, don't go and try to seek out a relationship right away. It's okay if you don't have that in your late teens. It's okay if you don't have that in your early or mid 20s. I know there's some people who haven't dated until they were 30 years old, and that's okay. There is no age limit and there is no age restriction for how old you're supposed to be before heading into a relationship. I think that's another thing that society kind of puts and engraves in our minds is that we have to be a certain age before we start dating. We have to be a certain age before we get married, kids, whatever. That is not true. And society will tell us that, and we will believe it. If you're not ready to be in a relationship at the moment, you're you're not ready. And that doesn't mean you won't ever be ready. You're going to be ready at some point, and that some point is going to come and it is going to happen. So we do not have to feel worried. We don't have to feel scared. We don't have to feel like we're missing out on life because we're not dating or we're not doing the traditional relationship stuff that some of our friends and other family members are doing. You do you. And that brings me to my other main point. If you do not want to be in a relationship at all, you do not have to be. Some people will tell you that you have to be in a relationship. You have to get married. You have to have kids. There is a lot of emphasis on the have to. And you don't have to do anything that you are not comfortable with. If dating is not for you, if you don't ever want to date, that's something that you have your heart and your mind set on. And again, people should and could respect that. And honestly, all kudos to you guys for saying that you don't want to date. Dating is hard, and dating does not have to be a core value that you have or you feel like you have to owe someone your dating experience or your dating life. Your dating life is yours. You get to share and choose who you want to let into that little circle and that little inner portion of your life. But again, you do not have to be in a relationship. You don't have to date. You don't have to go the traditional relationship route if it's not something that you're comfortable with. And it's not just something that you see for yourself. If what you see for yourself is a future where it's just you and work and growing old by yourself, that's okay. That shouldn't take away from all your achievements and your accomplishments in life. It's just something that you see is best suited for you. The next thing, agreeing to disagree. I I'm not gonna say I see this all the time, but I know it's a well taught. I know it's really taught. It's talked about a lot online and in real life too. But if agree, agreeing can mean good things. Let's say somebody wants to order takeout for dinner one night, and the other person is like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's look at restaurants together. And they look at restaurants together. They both agree that one restaurant is the right pick, and then voila, everyone's fed for dinner and stuff. It's also okay to disagree with someone's opinions, someone's viewpoints, if we're doing it in a respected way. Relationships aren't always meant to be relationships aren't always meant to have people agreeing with one another all the time. You are going to fall and you are going to have disagreements at times. You are going to have different opinions and different viewpoints. That's also totally acceptable and totally okay. It's bound to happen. If you don't agree with someone's opinion, you can vocalize that, you can verbalize it, but also just understand that you might have to back it up. Just because someone tells you something doesn't mean that that person should be completely dismissive of your own thoughts and your own viewpoints. Again, that's kind of where we see that two-way street of trust and honesty and the two-way street of communication. Disagreements are almost always going to happen. It's how you deal with it and how you come to terms with it is where it can take it from maintaining that healthy relationship and setting those personal either boundaries or open discussions, or is it going to turn into a full-on argument where you guys are going to ignore the person? Again, it's how you deal with it. I don't know the right way to kind of deal with it. Again, depends on the person. It depends on the situation too. But just know that it's okay to agree to disagree at times. You don't always have to agree with the person just because you feel like it warrants it. Again, you're just lying to yourself and you're lying to that person if you agree with something that they've said that you certainly don't agree with. And then that other person or those people are going to think that you have the same viewpoints as them. And it's going to become like kind of a constant, cycle of, hey, do you agree with me on this? You said that you agreed with my viewpoint on here. How about this viewpoint? Be honest right away. If you don't agree with something that someone says, let them know, but again, do it in a respectful and in a way where it opens up discussions and it opens up thoughts that you guys can have with one another. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is a tricky one, guys. People hurt people all the time. It's going to happen again. Mistakes are mistakes for a reason. We are we can learn from our mistakes. Again, we can learn from our failures, but other times we just completely and utterly screw up. And that can lead to signs of distrust between groups or between people. That can lead to fallouts, that can lead to burnouts, that can lead to, no more communication or cutting off all ties of communication with people. Forgiveness is tricky. And personally, I find it easier to forgive rather than forget. I know there's a saying to forgive or to forget. For me, I'm one of those people where I find it just easier to forgive someone for something that might have hurt me, but it doesn't mean that I'll necessarily forget it in the moment. What usually happens is that I'll forget what the argument or the disagreement was, and everything's going to turn out good. But again, my experiences can't and won't compare to other people's experiences or your guys' experience, especially in the dating realm. If someone messes up and they ask for your forgiveness, be you can I don't know. Again, I don't know how to say this without sounding, completely biased, but you don't have to, I'll say this. You don't have to forgive someone right away, especially if they've hurt you to a point where it just cuts and it's so deep. Again, it's normal to feel those feelings of disappointment, of sadness, maybe of anger, feeling betrayal if your partner in the relationship completely screws the pooch. I think there is a tiny sliver of hope for rekindling that relationship, but if you feel like it's unbroken and it's not meant to be fixed, don't try to seek out to fix it. That's something that the partner, the significant other, made very clear. If they're not willing to fix what you want to be fixed, walk away. Forgive the person, and then let it be. That's honestly my best piece of advice for couples, for people who are in sorry. That's my advice for people and for couples who find themselves in rocky relationships or in toxic relationships. If if the other person is not willing to fix what is already there, then it's kind of I think it's just kind of meaningless and hopeless to try to wait to see if they're going to come around and change their minds. If they're completely set on not wanting the relationship to go any further or being rekindled, you can't necessarily make them change their minds. They've already made up their mind, and now you're left with the choice of either just walking away. Well, I think the best choice in that situation is just to walk away from it. Support. I think I talked about this briefly too already, but support can be interpreted in lots of ways. You can support someone's activities, you can support someone's well-being, you can support someone's sexuality, someone's religion, someone's career paths, all the above. Support, and support doesn't have to be um you know verbal stuff. Support can be words of encouragement. Support can be maybe just a hug or a little shoulder rub to your partner or significant other. Support can come in so many shapes and forms. Just showing support for someone also shows that you care for them too. Um, so I know sometimes support can make us feel a little tiny bit insecure, especially if we're not really used to it at times. But I'm a big believer in that supporting someone is just showing someone that you care for them, that you love them, that you want to see them do well, and that you're right there by your side. So that's my little tangent on support. And then our final thing with relationship advice. I gave you guys some communication. We talked about honesty, talked about how it's okay to agree to disagree with people at times. We talked about the respect, forgiveness, support. And here's my biggest piece of advice. And when it comes to relationship stuff, you have to talk about the heavy stuff, guys. I know it's going to be hard talking about how feelings can be interpreted as the heavy stuff, but talk about the heavy topics. Talk about how you feel about sex. Talk about how you feel about, marriage in the future, or if you see marriage in your guys' future. Talk about where you see your life in 5 or 10 years. Talk about the future. Talk about all the heavy stuff that you know that you might not be comfortable or you might not be willing to talk about, but it's gonna have to happen. And you're gonna have to talk about this again, not so it creates an uncomfortable or a weird tension in the room, but the more you are open and the more you are communicating what you want and how you feel about certain issues, certain topics, the more that it allows the relationship to grow, not just in your personal and private lives, but in public too. I know sex can be a very uncomfortable topic, and if you are 100% not comfortable talking about that stuff right off the bat, that is normal, that is okay, that is fine, but the discussion is going to have to come up at some point when you're ready to take that step. Again, I don't know how to kind of go about that when I don't know people's experiences and their own personal opinions and viewpoints about that, but you can't really avoid it, especially if you want to take if you're dating and you want to take that relationship to the next level where all of a sudden it becomes topics and talks about marriage and engagement and house planning, all that stuff. Talk about the heavy stuff. Be be ready to maybe be uncomfortable, be ready to maybe feel emotions that are completely normal to feel. Emotions, again, is what makes us human. If we didn't have our emotions, we would all be like robots and talking in very robotic voices and just keep saying the same stuff with a straight face. And no one wants that. It's humans, I thrive off of, people's personalities and their voices too. I like seeing people being happy. I don't like seeing people being sad, but again, it's a completely normal emotion to feel and to experience at some point in life. It's what makes us people, and everyone has emotions. You're not the only person in the world feeling anxious. Trust me, there are millions of other people who feel anxious. You're not the only person in the world who feels anger, who feels guilt, who feels nerves, who feels, the happiness, the shyness, the every single emotion that there possibly is. Everyone deals with it in some way, shape, or form. Everyone deals with it differently. There is no right way to deal with emotions, and figure out the coping mechanism or the method that works best for you. I know I keep talking about it, doing stuff that only you want to do. And that's the best advice that I could possibly offer at this moment in time right now, but I think it can be true for a lot of people. And with that, that's it on relationship advice for this, guys. Again, I apologize if it sounded biased at times. I tried my hardest to try to be as neutral and as non biased as possible, but I understand how it can maybe be seen as biased at times, so my apologies for that. I hope that you guys learned something from this. I hope you guys got a little bit of solid advice from this. I like doing these life advice segments because I feel like I get to share some of more of my viewpoints or offer some takes on topics that I know a lot of people either deal with or are going through. The next life advice segment, I have something in mind for that, and I can talk about it now. It's about maintaining friendships. We already did talked about the fears that adults have. We talked about relationships. What other better way to end relationship? Or that sounded really bad in my mind, but move moving on from relationships, we're going to move into the friendship category of it. How to maintain friendships as you get older, how to keep a friend, how to maybe seek out looking for friends, all that fun stuff. That's going to be the next life advice segment. I do have content for some main episodes that I'm hoping to get out next week. Finals week is slowly approaching for me in a week and a half. So, and I know I've talked about this before too on main episodes, but I am giving more of my energy and my time and my focus into my studies right now because that is important to me. School is very important. I want to make sure that I'm keeping up with all that stuff because I'm a student first, and then all the fun hobbies and stuff comes after that. But after my week and a half of school, hopefully I'll have some more time to do these episodes and stuff. But for that, you were listening to the Ace for Waves podcast with me, Annabelle. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. See you soon.